Why the super empath lives forever in the avoidance mind? We all know the push-pull dance in relationships. One person gives, the other pulls away. But what happens when the one who gives is no ordinary giver? What happens when that person is a super empath? Let's break it down. The super empath doesn't just feel. They understand. They see through masks, pick up on the smallest shift in tone, and notice the moment someone's eyes stop smiling even though their mouth still is. They don't just listen to words, they feel the spaces between them. Now enter the avoidant. They crave connection, but fear being consumed by it. They want to be close, but not too close. Vulnerability feels like a trap. So what do? They pull back, they confuse intimacy with danger, and in the process, they sabotage something deeply nourishing. But here's the twisting. The super empath isn't just another fleeting connection. They aren't easily replaced. They don't beg, chase, or manipulate. They love deeply. But when the time comes, they leave gracefully. With dignity, with boundaries. And that's why they live forever in the avoidance mind, because the super empath touched something no one else did. They saw the avoidant fully and still chose to love them. And when they warped they left a silence louder than any argument, a memory wrapped in warmth that now feels out of reach. Avoidance might not chase, but they remember. Quietly, privately, endlessly, because the super empath was never trying to take anything. They were offering something the avoidant didn't know they needed until it was gone. So if you're that empath and you're wondering if they ever think about you, the answer is yes. Not because you demanded a place in their heart, but because you earned one. And nothing, not time, not distance, not even their defenses, can erase the imprint of someone who gave without asking, saw without judgment, and left with love. The super empath is not just someone who feels deeply. They are someone who reads deeply. They sense emotions the moment they enter a room, picking up on micro expressions, shifts in energy, tone changes, and subtle body language cues that most people overlook. While others respond to words, the super empath responds to what's beneath them. The hesitation in a sentence, the pause before a response, the look that doesn't match the smile. Their emotional radar is finely tuned, not by accident, but often from a lifetime of learning how to read others in order to survive, connect, or protect themselves and the people they care about. This level of emotional perception creates a powerful experience for anyone they connect with. They make others feel seen, not just liked, not just appreciated, but truly understood. It's rare. It's disarming. Most people walk through life with their guards up, not expecting others to notice the weight they carry in silence. But when a super empath enters the picture, that armor starts to loosen, not because they're prying, but because their presence feels safe. They're not looking to expose someone's vulnerabilities. They're simply present with them, and that in itself is healing. When the avoidant type meets a super empath, they often don't realize the significance of that connection at first. The avoidant, who usually keeps people at a distance, finds themselves confused. They feel seen, but not judged. They're given space, yet emotionally held. The super empath doesn't force connection. They offer it with open hands, without demand. And in that rare experience, the avoidant is caught off guard. They're used to people pushing for closeness, but the empath respects distance, all while remaining deeply emotionally available. That paradox is what makes the experience so unforgettable. Because of their perceptive nature, super empaths often respond to what a person needs, not just what they say. They'll offer support before someone asks. They'll sense sadness behind a smile and offer quiet understanding rather than solutions. This creates an emotional bond that doesn't feel forced. It feels fated, and because they don't perform this empathy as a strategy, but rather as their natural way of being, the connection feels pure, authentic. And when something feels that rare, it gets burned into memory. The avoidant may not acknowledge it in the moment, but they remember it. That depth, that intuitive understanding doesn't come around often, and when it's gone, it's not just missed. It's haunted. Avoidants often live in a constant state of emotional contradiction. They want connection, intimacy, and to feel truly known by another person. But the moment someone gets close enough to offer that, fear kicks in. They begin to worry that closeness will mean losing control, being engulfed, or being hurt. To them, vulnerability feels like exposure, and exposure feels dangerous. So even if they crave love, they resist it, pulling back the moment it starts to feel too intense, too real, or too safe. It's not because they don't feel, it's because they feel too much and don't know how to hold it without being overwhelmed. This internal struggle often manifests in confusing behaviors. They may be incredibly charming, open, and affectionate at first, leading the other person to believe they're fully invested. But when emotional depth starts to build, when their partner begins to understand them beyond the surface, they become guarded. Suddenly, they respond with distance, detachment, or even criticism. The same emotional intimacy they once leaned into now feels like a threat to their independence or safety. They often don't fully understand why they're pulling away. It can feel like instinct, a subconscious reaction that overrides their better judgment. The more the avoidant feels emotionally activated, the more they retreat. They create space, not just physically but emotionally. Through silence, mixed signals, or deflection, they tell themselves, "Stoic, this is too much. They're too intense." Or, "I just need space," when what's really happening is an internal fear response. They are terrified of being fully seen and then rejected, so they preemptively reject the connection before that fear can be confirmed. What complicates this even more is that the avoidant often chooses emotionally available, deeply empathic people. These partners offer the very thing they're afraid of: safe, consistent love. But because that love feels unfamiliar or even suspicious, they don't trust it. Deep down, many avoidants have unresolved wounds, often from childhood, where love came with conditions or unpredictability. So when someone comes along offering deep, stable connection, it doesn't feel comforting. It feels unfamiliar and therefore unsafe. As a result, their behavior isn't rooted in a lack of interest, but in a fear of emotional vulnerability. They are constantly navigating the tension between longing and fear, closeness and independence. And tragically, they often don't realize what they had until that safe, loving presence walks away. The super empath is wired for depth, but they're also grounded in self-awareness. They give freely, love fully, and often hold space for others in a way that feels rare and healing. But what sets them apart even more is their quiet strength, the kind that allows them to walk away when their emotional presence is not being respected, reciprocated, or valued. They don't leave out of spite or to provoke guilt. They leave because they recognize the futility of pouring love into a space that won't open to receive it. Unlike those who chase validation or beg for crumbs of attention, the super empath understands the difference between persistence and self-betrayal. They know that staying in a connection where they are constantly met with emotional walls, cold silences, or inconsistent affection slowly erodes their self-worth. So when they decide to leave, it's not a dramatic exit. It's often quiet, graceful, and deeply final. And this is exactly what lingers in the mind of the avoidant. Avoidants are used to people reacting emotionally, crying, pleading, fighting for closeness when it's withheld. This reinforces their belief that they're too much or that intimacy always comes with pressure. But the super empath doesn't play that role. They don't beg someone to change or chase someone who's emotionally unavailable. Instead, they hold their boundary, step back, and protect their own peace. Their leaving isn't filled with anger. It's filled with clarity. And that clarity is what haunts the avoidant long after the empath is gone. Because when someone leaves without needing to be convinced, without drama, and with their head held high, it creates a different kind of impact. It isn't just the absence of their presence. It's the absence of chaos. The super empath doesn't need to prove their worth or fight for attention. They know what they brought to the connection. They know the depth of what they offered. And they know that continuing to give to someone who cannot receive is not love. It's self-abandonment. This kind of exit is powerful because it leaves a space that is impossible to fill with superficial distractions. The avoidant, who once pulled away to feel in control, now finds themselves thinking about the one person who never tried to control them, just loved them fully and unconditionally, and then left with peace when it became clear that love could not fully land. That grace, that quiet dignity, lives on in their memory far longer than any argument or emotional plea ever could. When the super empath walks away, they don't slam doors or raise their voice. There's no grand display, no scorched earth. Instead, their absence settles in slowly, quietly, like a familiar song that stops playing mid-chorus. At first, it might seem like nothing has changed. After all, they didn't beg, they didn't demand closure, they didn't leave with ultimatums. But as time passes, the silence they leave behind begins to echo louder than any confrontation ever could. The avoidant, who often seeks distance to feel safe, initially experiences relief. Space feels like control, but that relief is fleeting. Because unlike emotionally reactive exits that they can rationalize away, the super empath's graceful departure doesn't give them an easy narrative to cling to. There's no choice to blame, no conflict to analyze, just a void. And that void is filled with the memory of someone who was consistently kind, emotionally available, and deeply attuned to their needs, even the unspoken ones. Avoidants are used to partners pushing for connection, pushing through resistance, trying to stay close even as they pull away. But when the super empath leaves without chasing, it disrupts that familiar dynamic. It forces the avoidant to confront what was lost, not because someone told them, but because they feel it deeply, daily. The space that opens up is not just about the person being gone. It's about what their presence meant. The support, the safety, the sense of being understood without ever having to fully explain. These things linger. And it lingers even more precisely because there was no final argument, no emotional outburst to minimize. The empath didn't need to be right, they just needed to be whole. So they stepped away with compassion, not resentment. And that kind of leaving, clean, loving, self-assured, has a way of staying with someone. The avoidant may try to distract themselves, rationalize the loss, or suppress the emotions it stirs, but the memory isn't easy to shake. It becomes a quiet that shows up in unexpected places, a song, a scent, a familiar phrase, because the empath didn't just leave, they left behind a standard, a feeling, a version of connection that the avoidant didn't realize they were capable of experiencing and now can't unknow. The absence of drama becomes its own kind of message. One that says, I loved you deeply, I saw you fully, and I chose myself too. And that message echoes over and over long after the door has closed. The connection between a super empath and avoidant isn't something that fades like a passing crush. It imprints. The empath doesn't just touch the avoidant's life. They quietly change the way that person sees connection, often without even realizing it. Because when someone comes into your life and accepts parts of you that you've spent years hiding or protecting, it doesn't just register as love. It registers as safety. And for the avoidant, who has learned to equate vulnerability with risk, that experience is both disarming and unforgettable. The super empath offers something that most people don't: presence without pressure. They show up consistently and calmly, never forcing emotion, but never withholding it either. They listen to what's said and, more importantly, to what's not. They read fear without judgment and offer comfort without strings. That level of attunement doesn't feel like attention. It feels like being known. And in a world where so many interactions are surface level or performative, that kind of knowing cuts deep. Even if the avoidant isn't ready to receive it fully, they still feel it. They may resist it, push it away, or even try to convince themselves it wasn't real. But deep down, they know it was different. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't a transaction. The super empath gave without needing to be needed. They loved without making it a demand. And that purity is what makes it unforgettable. Most people eventually fade into memory, but the super empath leaves behind a different kind of legacy. They become a point of comparison. Every connection that follows is, on some level, measured against the standard the empath set. Not through perfection, but through depth and sincerity. The avoidant may not admit this out loud, even to themselves, but it shows up in their discontent with surface-level bonds. It reveals itself in their quiet longing for the way they once felt truly understood without having to explain. It lives in the silence that now feels colder, more hollow, because they know what warmth once felt like. This isn't about romanticizing pain or turning the empath into some unreachable figure. It's about acknowledging the reality that when someone touches your emotional core without demanding you change, they leave something behind. The avoidant may have pulled away, chosen fear over connection, but the experience of being deeply seen and gently loved doesn't just vanish. It lingers, shapes, and silently influences the way they think about closeness, even if they never say a word. And so, the super empath doesn't avoidant with guilt or bitterness. They linger because their love was rare, sincere, and freely given. In a world where so many connections are built on fear, performance, or control, the super empath offered something different: love without pressure, presence without expectation, depth without drama. They didn't just touch the avoidant's heart. They revealed it. For a moment, they held space for the parts the avoidant was too afraid to show. And when the walls stayed up too long, they didn't try to tear them down. They simply stepped back with grace, with strength, with love still intact. That's why they live on in the avoidant's mind, not because they forced their way in, but because they earned their place quietly. Honestly, powerfully, thank you for listening. And if you've ever been that super empath, wondering if your presence ever truly mattered, let this be your reminder: it did. It does. And even in your absence, the echo of your love still speaks. Take care of your heart, protect your peace, and never forget the power of your presence. Thank you.